Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really excited to share this topic with you from three very unique perspectives, and each is designed to help you strengthen how you lead, how you communicate, and also how you show up with intention. A couple of housekeeping notes before we start. If you have any questions, type them into the comments in the chat so that we can identify them as we're going through the program. And you can address who they're for, either myself, I'm Lisa, Jessica, or Kelly. And at the end of the presentation, we'll provide you with the CE survey information. And be sure to stay with us to the end. If you do need your CE, it's AGDCE. And we'll give you that information at the very end. It'll also come out in an email after the program today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica.
We'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank Reach, our premium sponsor for today's webinar. Joining us from Reach is Jonathan McGrath, Senior Business Development Manager. He's going to share a brief introduction and information about the work that Reach is doing. Jonathan, thank you for being here. I'm happy to turn it over to you.
Yeah, first, thank you, Lisa, Jessica, and Kelly for inviting Reach to collaborate with you guys today on this webinar. I'm really glad to be here. Today we're here to learn and talk about presence, emotional energy, and what really means to leave a positive impression, right? And I want to touch that, not too deep because I'm not the expert on the subject, but in the dental practice, that impression is happening in three fronts at once, right? The experience for the team, the experience for the practice owner, and the experience for the patient. And the problem we see is that the front desk in dentistry in general is almost a system designed for failure, right? It's just too much happening to too few people all in the same place all at once. So every missed call, every insurance issue, every billing problem, trying to check patients in and out while you have three, lines ringing, it all piles up. And that power up does two things. First, it burns out the team, which eventually reaches the practice owner, right? And it quietly ruins that experience for the person on the other end of the phone or the patient sitting right there, right? That positive impression that everyone's trying to build is just not being able to be created at this point. It just doesn't happen because nobody has room to create it. That's exactly what Reach is built to solve. We provide engaged remote team members to take the workload off the plate of the people who should be focused on being present, right? Who should be connecting with patients, who should be building that reputation for the practice. And the way we do it is through, like I mentioned, dedicated remote team members who work solely for that practice. That way they learn the workflows, the ins and outs, they get familiar with the patients of that practice. And they are there to handle the front desk work that isn't the best use of your in-office team's time. Let's put it this way. So they're there to take care of calls, insurance verification, revenue cycle management, sorry, and any administrative duties, really. When that administrative weight lives somewhere else with someone whose solely job is to carry it, the in-office team get their time back, right? And just to close, the part that I'd really like to sit with is the patient experiences starts, it's mostly decided even before they walk in, right? The appointment got confirmed, the benefits were verified, so there's not that awkward surprise at checkout. And the call was actually answered by a real person with the right script, with the right tone. So getting that invisible work right is what lets your team's presence really land. So you'll get a QR code at the end of this webinar. You also get a follow-up email. So I won't take more of anyone else's time. If any of what I just said resonates while you're listening and learning today, it is a good sign that it's worth the conversation. And I'll be happy to talk to anyone interested. Now, on to the part everyone's actually here for. I'd just like to thank you once again. And I hope you all enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right, let's dive into leading with presence. So I was recently on a flight and I was seated next to someone that was very anxious. And I luckily am not an anxious flyer, but I could feel how anxious she was. I could see her fidgeting. I could feel her, I could hear her breathing, right? I just could feel it. And it really distracted me. I don't want to say it made me anxious. I think it just really tuned me into how she was feeling. And while I was planning to relax and read or even maybe watch a movie on this flight, I couldn't help but be thinking, is there something I could say to help her feel better? Is there something I could do, right? I just was kind of preoccupied by wanting to help this other person's anxious feelings go away. Well, luckily she calmed down eventually, which was nice. So I was able to relax at some point, but it had me thinking, imagine if the leader of the plane, the pilot, displayed unsure or anxious feelings, right? What if he got on the loudspeaker and shared, hey, everybody, really nervous today about the flight. The weather's going to be terrible. Or, I mean, what if he displayed some anxiety to the rest of the people on the plane? Would anybody on that flight feel comfortable? Would they be able to relax? Probably not, right? And as leaders, our energy is really what is setting the tone of the flight, the day, the treatment we're about to encounter with our patients. So the leaders really set the tone and we become the model for which the other team members look to. So if the leader is off, it's really difficult for the team to compensate. The flight attendants could come through and be like, oh, it's going to be great. Here's a bag of chips. But we're like, no, the pilot said we could crash or whatever, So we have to really be aware of, if we're on a leadership role, how we're impacting the journey and the rest of the team and how they're able to compensate for that. And that is just one example of the power of presence. Today, we're going to look at 3 aspects of leading with presence: emotional energy, professional presence, and communication influence. So our brains are actually wired to catch emotions. Emotional contagion is not just a metaphor, it's actually a biological process. The brain has mirror neurons that activate when we see someone else express an emotion. So if you've ever seen someone else cry and you can't help but get a little choked up yourself, that's that happening, right? If you are watching a funny video of a baby giggling and you find yourself smiling or laughing along, there's another moment where you're catching that other individual's or even animal's emotion, right? These neurons help us to empathize with others, but they can also cause us to absorb other people's emotional states. In healthcare settings with anxious, stressed, or overwhelmed patients, this effect is amplified. And this is why one tense team member can shift the entire room within minutes. Know this: your brain is hardwired to tune into the emotional temperature of the people around you, whether you choose that or not. The amygdala reacts before you do. So the amygdala is the part of the brain that is our alarm center. And it reacts before the logical brain can step in and process what's actually happening. So when someone else is stressed, your amygdala senses it and it mirrors the response. You might feel a heart rate increase, your breathing might change, your tone might shift. And this is why a leader's stress or frustration spreads so quickly. The amygdala acts like a Wi-Fi hotspot, broadcasting stress signals to everyone nearby. And leaders amplify those emotional signals because teams unconsciously sync with the emotional cues of the person with the most positional power. So the leader's tone, their pace, their body language, their facial expressions, it all shapes how the team actually feels, often within seconds. A regulated leader creates a regulated team. A reactive leader, a reactive team. You can say that you're fine, but if your body is broadcasting stress, your team is going to pick up that stronger signal, whether you want them to or not. So self-awareness is a biological interrupter. It helps us notice our own emotional state. It helps us identify things that might trigger us to get off kilter. It can help us regulate our own feelings and emotions before we ripple that energy to others. It can allow us to choose intentional responses instead of reactive ones. And it can actually shift our physiology. We're going to talk about breathing, posture, tone. Identifying our own emotions can help us to model that emotional regulation that we want our team to have as well. So self-awareness is the first step in breaking the contagion cycle. Because if you can't regulate what you don't first recognize. Self-awareness enables emotional boundaries, a barrier of sorts, like this chain link fence I have on the screen. Boundaries aren't just psychological, they're neurological. When you're self-aware, you can distinguish that this is my emotion, not from their emotion. It's separate from someone else's emotions. You can prevent patient anxiety from becoming team anxiety or your own anxiety. You can avoid absorbing coworkers' stress. You can maintain clarity under pressure. And you can respond with compassion without over-identifying. Without self-awareness, you don't just feel with people, you start feeling for them. And that's actually what leads to burnout. Emotional contagion has been found to affect performance. Research shows that emotional states influence our problem-solving abilities, our ability to communicate, to be creative, to be accurate in what we're doing, to empathize, to be productive, and to have resilience. Positive emotions open up the brain for learning and collaboration. Negative emotions narrow our focus and trigger that survival mode behavior, that protect, defend, shut down. It makes me think of someone on the team receiving a text during the workday that their family was in some kind of a car accident. After receiving that text, do you think that that person is able to think straight? Are they going to be creative? Are they going to find a way to solve a complex problem? Are they going to be empathetic toward that nervous patient or that frustrated coworker? Probably not. They get into fight or flight mode, right? They're worrying about, oh my gosh, I've got to contact my family. I might need to get to the hospital, right? Their brain gets into that survival mode and it closes all those other avenues down. So this is why a team can feel off even when nothing is said aloud. A stressed brain protects, a calm brain performs. I happen to love the work of David Bayer. If you're familiar with him at all, he teaches a framework called the 2 states of being. And it's basically the idea that at any moment in time, we are operating from one of 2 states, a primal state or a powerful state. So it avoids labeling emotions as good or bad. The question then becomes, am I currently operating from survival or from my best self? So a primal state puts us into protection mode. The primal state is your brain and body trying to keep you safe. It is often connected with that fight or flight stress response. So it can look like frustration, defensiveness, anxiety, overwhelm, resentment, comparison, blame, feeling rushed, shutting down, overwhelmed. In a healthcare setting, a primal thought is, this patient is really difficult. A primal reaction is maybe a shorter tone, less patience, assuming negative intent, rushing, maybe venting to a coworker in the break room, avoiding a conversation. The problem is that your brain is designed to survive in this state, not necessarily to create, to connect, to communicate, or to problem solve. A phrase that summarizes it is a dysregulated brain protects before it connects. The powerful state is the possibility mode. The powerful state is when you are more regulated, open, and able to access higher level thinking. David Bayer describes this state with emotions such as curiosity, peace, joy, gratitude, calm. It can look like compassion, confidence, creativity, patience, problem solving. So the same situation can occur. The powerful thought is, this patient is upset. I wonder what they need from me right now. The powerful response could then be, I could ask some questions. I might do some active listening to the patient. I'm going to stay calm. I can create some solutions to this. The situation usually isn't what changes, the interpretation is what does. And a big part of Bayer's teaching is that circumstances themselves don't determine our state. The meaning that we assign to those circumstances heavily influences whether we move into primal or powerful states. So here's another example. In a healthcare setting, the schedule falls apart. right? That's just what's happening. It's not good or bad. That's what's happening. The primal interpretation is nothing ever goes right. Today is going to be terrible. The powerful interpretation is this is frustrating, but we've solved scheduling problems before. What's our next best move? The same event, a different state, and a different outcome. So the secret sauce for the most successful people that live joyful lives is how quickly they can shift from primal state to a powerful state. Because our brain naturally goes into that primal state. And from what we learned about emotional contagion, someone else can even automatically just suck us into that, right? So the good news is that small shifts create big ripples. Even tiny self-regulation moments create a measurable difference. So here are some strategies. Pause before entering a patient room. Get yourself centered. Feel your feet on the ground. Don't just have them on the ground, feel them on the ground. Roll your shoulders back. Take a slow breath before speaking. You can even use some box breathing where you breathe in, hold your breath, breathe out, hold your breath. It slows everything down. You might need to reset after a difficult conversation. Just go into a room and be alone for a minute and just do some deep breathing. Check your tone before delivering feedback. These small pauses remind you to put your powerful brain into action. It allows you to identify the emotion, maybe put it in the jar and save it for later. If it's that important, it will stay and be there. You can also think about flipping the narrative and think, okay, I'm having this thought. What is the powerful question here? How can I flip it and make it a powerful state as opposed to a primal state? There's also some pressure points on your body that's always accessible to you between your thumb and your pointer finger. So you can press on that spot and kind of hold down on it. And it's naturally going to help kind of regulate your body. I don't understand the science, but it works. The other area is the top of your cheek. If you were to press this spot a number of times, it also can help just calm you down. It probably distracts you too, right, from what you're thinking and feeling, and you're focusing on calm, right? So, but there's a bunch of research out there. People get very into this acupressure tapping. There are clinicians that do these types of services to help people regulate. But those are some just little areas. Normalizing regulation with the team is important. Asking for help. If you're a leader, yes, it's important that you're setting a positive tone, but there are times when you are going to be thrown off and saying, I need a 30-second reset, or I'm feeling really activated. Give me a minute. Not only does it have them give you that time that you might need, it also is showing them and you're modeling for them how they can regulate when they feel overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, whatnot. A 30-second reset from a leader can change the next 3 hours of team energy. The next portion of our program is focused on professional presence with Kelly. Have there been any questions that have come into the chat while we have Kelly take over?
No, but I saw everybody tapping their face and squeezing the web between their thumb and their finger. And I've actually used those techniques.
Yes,
I
try it
don't,
out. It's hard to do it when you're not stressed, you don't feel a lot
yeah,
different, but in those moments when you start to feel that elevation, give it a try and see what works for you.
Right.
um,
100%. I was doing it because I'm the next speaker.
I don't see any questions. I'll let you know. Oh, wait, let's see. Lisa, thank you and your colleagues for doing this webinar. I'm so grateful to have met you during AAPD media training. That's sweet. Thank you so much. Who's that from? Tiffany. Nice to see you. That was it.
All
Take it
right. Well,
over,
Kelly.
Kel.
Great. Get myself here. So thank you, Jessica. You set my section up really nicely for what we're going to continue our conversation. So, and hello to everyone for being here with us this afternoon or this evening, wherever you're coming from. So, the idea of making small shifts is the perfect segue, I would say, into our topic of professional presence, because that's really what it's all about. So, every day you communicate more than you ever realize, actually. So, before you speak, patients are already forming impressions based on your posture, your facial expressions, your body language, your tone of voice, and even the pace at which you move. So the challenge, I would say, is that most of these behaviors happen on autopilot. They're not intentional. They're just simple habits that take over during a busy day, right? So when you're focused on what you got to get done, you don't really think about all these little things. So when we think about that, an example, so is imagine walking into an operatory while thinking about staying on schedule. You greet the patient while pulling on your gloves, gathering your instruments in probably a hastily manner and getting ready to go and immediately beginning the exam. So your intention is I'm staying on schedule. The patient's experience is I'm just the next appointment. So now make one small shift, kind of alluding to even what Jessica had started to share already, where it starts from the inner core is pause for 5 minutes, stand tall, smile, make eye contact, greet the patient before beginning the actual clinical work. So nothing about dentistry changed, but everything about the patient's experience did. So that's the power of professional presence. Every interaction is an opportunity to reinforce your professional image by becoming more intentional about your actions, your communications, and your presence as a whole. You can build trust, you can strengthen relationships, and create a more meaningful patient experience. So our goal today really is simple, to help you wake up your autopilot, the things you do all the time, so you can intentionally create the impression that supports the successes that you want for yourself, for your team, and for your patients. So first, let's consider the details that shape an impression. Often it's the little things we experience every day that leave the biggest impression. So think about one of your favorite places or experiences. This does not have to be in dental. It could be anywhere. I shared a picture here from my home. This is my favorite spot. This is where I start every morning. I'm very lucky. I live on a lake and this is my spot. I happen to make strawberry shortcake in the afternoon and this added to the experience. But when your own favorite place or experience, what made it so memorable? Take a moment and really picture yourself in one of your favorite places. So when you're there, think about what are 5 things that you see, like the details. In my picture, I would see the sun glistening on the water, the leaves rustling, a bird flying by. I want you to think of those minute details. What are 4 things that you hear? 3 things that you feel? And potentially your space has 2 things you smell and 1 thing you taste. So take a second and think about that. And then what I'd ask you is what made it memorable? It was really all the details that made it memorable for you. And this is what can happen as an experience. We're going to flip that thought. So when we flip the experience, I want you to shift it to your work environment, into your patient's experience and their perspective. So think back to the rushed entrance example, or to Jessica's discussion about moving from primal to power states. What did the patient see? What did they hear? What did they feel? Your pace, your posture, your facial expressions, your tone, your emotional energy all communicate something. And those seemingly small details influence how safe, valued, and cared for your patients really feel. So what we want to think about is that patients may not remember every word you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that impression is built through what I call the little things. So we want to talk about total image development. This is where you can develop the thought of looking and developing your little things or those details. So the goal of total image development is to build a complete professional presence, one that thinks, looks, acts, and communicates in a way that's authentic to you while aligning with the culture and brand of your practice. So at the center is your hidden image. This is the foundation of everything else. This includes your values and purpose, and your attitudes and your mindset, plus actually a whole bunch more. But for tonight, that's what it is going to convey. It's that core foundation. As Jessica shared, these shape your emotional state, and that emotional energy influences everyone around you. So surrounding that foundation is your assumed image. If we walk around the dial there, so at like 1, 2 o'clock, we see the assumed image. The first impression people form before they truly know you. That impression is shaped by 3 visible elements. It's your appearance, which is how you present yourself and your dress to your environment and around you. Your behavior and etiquette, so how you conduct yourself and interact with others, to your communication skills, so how you speak, listen, and connect with others. So over time, those daily interactions become your proven image. That's the reputation you earn through consistency. So if we look at those details, that's what is going to help you prove a success, or make a proven successful image for yourself. So when all these elements work together, they lead to image success, a confident, authentic presence that builds trust and strengthens your personal and practice brand. So a takeaway from this is it's the little things. Don't forget that. I'll maybe beat it into you. It's the little things. It's the details that you control every day that shape the experience that your patients have with you and your practice. So let's take a minute and look at those ABCs. So every day you get dressed, you interact with others, you communicate. When I say we've been doing this since we were a baby, right? So why should we have to look at it? But again, it kind of goes on autopilot in the background. So often without even thinking about it, we don't realize these things are going on. So those everyday behaviors make up your interpersonal communication skills. So interpersonal communication isn't just about the words you use. It's also your body language, facial expressions, posture, eye contact, tone of voice, and your ability to listen and connect with others. So why it matters. Your patients are constantly interpreting these verbal and nonverbal messages. They influence whether patients feel welcomed, whether they feel understood, respected, and confident in your care. So when your communication is intentional, you build trust, you strengthen relationships, you improve teamwork, and you create a patient experience that people remember. So it isn't that we want you to change who you are, it's to become more aware of what you're already communicating. So when we think about the ABCs, that appearance, behavior, and communication, we're really talking about things you already do every day. The difference is becoming intentional. Small adjustments in these areas can strengthen your professional presence and support every patient interaction. So I 3 tips here are on the ABC. So when we think about tip 1, research and experience tell us that patients begin forming impressions within seconds. Before treatment even begins, they've decided whether they feel safe, confident, and cared for. So what I want you to do is ask yourself, does my appearance reflect professionalism and confidence? Are my scrubs and shoes and overall presentation supporting trust? Would a first-time patient immediately feel confident in my care? So an example for you to think about what you can do with dress here is that even your colors communicate. We're going to pick on the color blue for a second. For example, navy blue often conveys confidence, stability, and professionalism, while lighter shades of blue tend to evoke calmness and comfort. So there's actually a reason why hospitals went from code red to code blue. It's because blue is soothing and calming. So you can use color in your scrubs. So what colors are reflected in your scrubs, your office environment, your administrative attire? Every choice sends a message. Understanding how colors communicate can help you shape the perceptions and the experience of those around you. And remember, every detail contributes to the overall impression. So appearance isn't about perfection. It's about reducing uncertainty and building trust, and that you can actually use appearance and visual aspects of image as a tool to guide your communication. So tip number 2, our body language speaks first. Patients notice far more than your words. They notice your posture, your pace, your eye contact, facial expressions, and that overall energy. So consider, do I appear calm or rushed? Think about our examples that Jessica and I both shared. Do I make eye contact before turning to the computer? One of my pet peeves, where you turn around and you see somebody's back. And that's it in the clinical setting. Does my presence help patients feel at ease? So, a story of the back to the patient. I had my own prophy a few months ago, and I had the experience of the rushed entrance. My general came in for the exam. He did squeak out a little bit of a hi. Hello, I've known him for years. I work for him, and then he's my general now, since I'm not practicing clinically as a hygienist anymore. But then he immediately turned his back to me, facing the screen, and proceeded to talk through the schedule with my hygienist. Now, granted, yes, I know him, I work for him, but I'm still there as a patient, right? And I'm fairly confident that this happens with his other patients too. So, other additional considerations that you can, look at is that you can use to your advantage to creating an optimal experience for your patient is using space, proximity, and orientation that's available to you. I've observed through the years, I worked for a fantastic periodontist for years, and just how you sit or move your chair around the table or around the operatory chair. If he needed to make a point, he would immediately like push himself back and put his hands on his legs and set up straight. That commanded the attention of his patient for, if he was excited about something or a patient was disagreeing with him, he didn't say a word, but he had the attention of his patient. I had another associate doctor in a practice, and observing her when she got excited about something and she wanted her patient to really understand the benefits of what that treatment would do for them, she would sit up on the edge of her chair, her feet up on the legs of the stool, and lean forward in to the patient. And it had an amazing effect on the communication that ensued. So, what we want to consider that is that calm, intentional behavior helps lower anxiety and moves the conversation along as it begins. Then tip number 3 is we want to think about with the communication piece is listening. Listen to understand. One of the fastest ways to build trust is helping patients feel genuinely heard. So try to pause before responding. It might seem like it's a lot of time in between when they finish their words or sentence and you made your pause, but it's really not that long. So pause before responding. Confirm understanding. Resist the urge to interrupt. That happens a lot, what I'd say, in observations. Instead of saying, I know exactly what you mean, try, tell me more about what's concerning you. So when we think about this, patients may forget what you said, but they'll remember how well you listened. As we continue today's webinar, Lisa will share additional strategies for strengthening your behavior and communication skills through the communication influence section. So as we continue on, when we think about your hidden image, that's your values, your purpose, your attitude and mindset is aligned with your visual and experienced image, your appearance, behavior, and communications. So you create a professional presence that is authentic, consistent, and trustworthy. So it's the little things repeated consistently that shape every impression, ultimately defining the patient experience. So 2 final tips for you here when we bring things together for you is that consistency creates credibility. Patients build trust through consistent experiences, not just isolated here and there moments. So ask yourself, does our front desk experience reflect the same level of care as our clinical experience? So think about what Jonathan shared about the patient journey and how Reach can help at the front desk. I mean, that's that part of that major first impression piece. Really important. How is that experience reflected in your practice? Does our team's appearance align with the way we communicate? Are we creating the same positive feelings at every patient touch point? As Jessica and Lisa have shared, every interaction matters. So patients don't experience individuals, they experience the practice as a whole. When we bring communication and patient experience together and we end every interaction with clarity, one of the easiest ways to build confidence is to make sure patients know exactly what comes next. Before every appointment ends, confirm the next step. It's simple things that you can do. Clarify, follow up expectations. Ask what questions can I answer before you leave today? So clarity is going to reduce anxiety, it will build confidence, and it's going to strengthen patient loyalty that we all want, right? What I say, butts and seats, that's what we want in referring patients. So closing thoughts here. The little things become the big things because they're repeated every single day. So think of the total image development as a framework for awareness, alignment, and action. It's not about striving for perfection. It's about becoming really more intentional with the everyday moments that shape trust, strengthen relationships, and elevate the patient experience. Because what I'll say in the end, professional presence isn't built through one, wild, extraordinary interaction. It's built through hundreds of ordinary interactions done with intention. So take a moment and do your own ABC check-in here for a second. So before your next patient interaction, take a moment to check in with yourself. And I'm going to ask you to check in with yourself even right now. So with appearance, ask yourself, what am I communicating before I even speak? With behavior, what are my actions demonstrating? They look at yourself under a microscope. It might sound a little scary, but do that. Or maybe ask for accountability partner in the office to watch each other because again, these are things that just happen. Remember the autopilot piece? Communication. What kind of experience am I creating through my words, tone, and presence? So, and remember, it's small intentional shifts creating meaningful impressions. So take a moment here and consider, what's that one ABC shift you'll commit to making after today's webinar? Anybody want to share in chat? And Lisa or Jessica, if we get any responses, if you could share those. If none are coming up, we'll go on. But what I want you to make sure is think about what's one small shift from what Jessica has shared, what I've shared, and what you're going to learn from Lisa here coming up.
Let's see. Somebody said wear a suit.
Very good. Yeah, now you might not do that in the clinical role, but if you're at the front desk potentially, or again, we're directing this a lot towards right in the practice, but if you're not in a clinical setting and you have other venues and so forth that you're at, then that definitely could play the part for you. Excellent. Any others?
I think that's it.
Very good. Well, for yourself, make sure you jot your own thoughts down of what you can do. Again, it doesn't have to be big changes. It can be subtle little things that can make a difference for yourself. So every patient interaction sends a message. Trust isn't built by accident. It's built through the details. So, and those are what are going to make the biggest difference for you. So through your appearance, behavior, and communication, you have the opportunity to create confidence, reduce anxiety, and strengthen trust within every interaction. So as you leave today, choose one ABC habit to focus on this week and practice it with intention. So patients may not remember every procedure, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Professional presence isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional. A very important one to realize and remember. And here's my challenge to you. So wake up your autopilot. Know what's going on. Embrace the little things and create an experience your patients will never forget. So that concludes my portion. And are there any questions right now for myself or the beginning part of our program?
There was a couple more answers that came in, so while I switch over, maybe one of you can share for things that people are going to change.
Right, let's see. I got to get back to chat unless you see that, Jessica.
Yeah, it says unwrinkled scrubs, doctors in a lab coat embroidered with a name. I love that. I'm going to continue being more intentional about pausing and not rushing when I'm running behind with a patient.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a question here saying, how should we communicate when a patient doesn't want to move forward with treatment?
Ooh, hold that thought because
Oh,
I'm coming up on it.
yeah. Yeah, I think Lisa, I have some thoughts, but I want to stick to what
Me
Lisa
too.
has here. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Very good one. And one that happens, I think, pretty frequently. So
Yeah. Yep. Was that
And
it?
that's all
great.
we have.
Any
Yep,
others?
that's it.
All right. Let's move into the last part.
Okay, great. Yeah, so Lisa, welcome. Take the stage, please.
Thank you. Great stuff. I always learn from you guys. So thank you for joining me and being my partners in crime for tonight. Have you ever asked a patient, "Are you okay?" And they say, "I'm fine." Everything about their face, their tone, their body language says absolutely not. And I can tell you from experience with bike riding with my husband, if I am in an uncomfortable situation where the ride is too technical or the ride is really challenging or I've fallen off and everybody else is ahead of me and my husband will circle back and find me and he'll ask me, "Are you okay?" And if I say through gritted teeth, "I'm fine," he knows to just go ahead and never come back because my body language is totally different. What that is presence speaking before the words ever arrive. And we're talking about the similar things, the three of us, but it's all in different contexts so that you can bring it all together. And so we can say the right thing, but if our tone or our timing or our posture or our energy tells a different story, people believe the presence before they believe the words. And that's why communication isn't just what we say, it's the presence in action. And so this final section is going to bring everything together that Jessica and Kelly talked about to introduce the emotional energy that matters and the professional presence that matters. Communication is with both of those becoming visible. So it kind of ties the bow on top of the present. Every conversation's an opportunity to either build trust or to create uncertainty. And in dentistry, influencing is happening all day long with our patients, with our team members, with our doctors, with our vendors, with our managers, and even in the hallway in between appointments. So, presence not only is how you enter the room, it's how you communicate once you're in it. You're not just communicating information, you're creating that experience that we've talked about all along. Your tone arrives before your words land. Tone is one of the fastest ways that we can influence trust. You can say the right words, but if your tone sounds rushed or irritated or dismissive or uncertain, that's the message that people receive. It's not the actual words that we're saying. So, for example, think about this phrase: "I can help you with that." Now, imagine it said with warmth and confidence: "Sure, I can help you with that." And on the flip side, imagine it said with a sigh and a look at the computer or no eye contact. "Of course, I'll help you with that." Same words, very, very different experience. And we're all guilty of doing this, right? We get distracted in our own head, we get distracted in our own day. So patients and team members are always listening beyond the words. They're listening for safety and confidence and respect and sincerity. Practical prompts for an important conversation could include: number one, what do I want them to hear? Number two, what do I want them to feel? And number three, does my tone support that? So think about that before you walk into a conversation, especially if you're having a stressful day, because we all know things can look great on paper or on the computer in the morning huddle, and by 10 o'clock, things are not going well. And we get stressed and we try to accommodate staying on time, and sometimes the way that we interact with the patients falls behind. Influential communicators don't just listen to respond, they listen to understand what's beneath the words. And so the tip of the iceberg is what we see, but what lies beneath the surface is what we really need to know. So in dentistry, I use what's called surface words, which are the words that you see on the left of the screen. The real conversation is underneath. It's on the right side. And so if they're saying, "I need to think about it," it might mean, "I'm afraid." So you know how we only see the top portion of an iceberg and the underneath is usually much larger? That's what those surface words are indicating. We're hearing one thing, but they're probably meaning another. The real conversation's often underneath on the right side. And so no one told me that, or I don't feel heard, right? So we have to interpret, but in order to do that, we have to ask questions. The best communication is to not chase the words. Get curious about the meaning behind them and ask intentional questions. Really be focused on getting to the answer of what's really the obstacle that the patient is having with moving forward. Kelly talked about the pause, and as a speaker, the pause is one of my most powerful tools from the podium. In everyday conversations, try to develop a habit of pausing before we defend or before we explain or correct or react or fill in the silence. Because pausing to a lot of people is very uncomfortable. And it doesn't have to be long, 2, 3 seconds, but some people get very uncomfortable with that. So you kind of have to practice it if it's something that makes you feel out of your comfort zone. What the pause does is it connects beautifully to emotional regulation, like Jessica talked about. And it's also one of the most underrated communication tools that we have in our tool belt. A pause gives your brain just that second to move from a primal state to a powerful state. Do you remember those way back in the beginning that Jessica talked about? It keeps you from reacting to the emotion in the room and allows you to choose your response instead of an emotional response. So in a patient conversation, a pause can communicate confidence. In a team conversation, a pause can communicate or prevent escalation. And in a leadership moment, a pause can help people feel heard instead of being managed. So they're being led instead of being managed. So example phrases that we might use when we're interacting, let's say, with a patient. That's a fair concern. Let me make sure I understand. Or tell me more about what feels unclear. I use that one a lot. It's probably my favorite one. Tell me more about that. I want to respond thoughtfully, not react quickly. And that gives you that moment to think about your answer and also observe what is happening with the team member or with the patient. Or let's pause and reset this conversation because I feel like we're not on the same page. So let's just take a pause and reset. A pause is not empty space, it's leadership space. If we ask better questions, we're going to get better outcomes. And think about the last time that you asked an open-ended question and you actually sat back and listened to the answer, and it strengthened the conversation and the relationship almost instantly. So open-ended questions are one of the strongest ways to influence a conversation. Telling creates information, asking creates engagement. Instead of telling, first ask, what matters to you most? That's a great question to ask your patient because what we think, about restoring number 8 that is fractured or doing the filling or putting the crown on number 30 is completely different from maybe what the patient came in for, which is sometimes whitening. So we have to know. We have to know what matters most to the patient. What would help you feel more comfortable? That's a really good one, especially if you have an anxious patient. What do you need from me right now? Or what is our next best step? So those are some of the resources that you can have in your pocket to ask more intentional questions and get better information. When we ask better questions, we invite people to join the conversation. We learn what matters and we uncover resistance. We create ownership. This is especially important when important with patients, sorry, because education alone doesn't always make them see things clearly. So some examples of teams, the way we're going to use this with teams, instead of why didn't this get done, maybe try what got in the way and what support do you need to move forward. Much nicer way for you to ask, what do you need help with? Patient example might be instead of you really need to do this treatment, try what concerns do you have about moving forward? The right question can open a door that more information keeps knocking on. Bridge before you redirect. And this is a really powerful communication technique for both patients and teams. All too often, we redirect the conversation before people feel heard. And that can sound dismissive or even when our intention is good. And that could be part of like what Kelly said. You're coming into the room, you're rushed, you're putting on your gloves, you're trying to stay on time. So think about bridging a statement. It helps people feel respected before we move the conversation forward. So examples of this could be with a patient. I can understand why the cost feels overwhelming. So let's walk through what's most urgent and what options you have. In a leadership example, I can understand this change feels frustrating. So let's talk through the reasons behind it and what support the team needs in order for us to move forward. The bridge statements lowers the resistance because they tell the person, I heard you, I'm not dismissing you, and I'm still going to lead us forward, but I need to know what the challenges are. Connection first, direction second. That order matters. Connection first, direction second. Communication influence isn't about saying more, it's about making things clearer. So patients feel more confident when they understand what's happening, why it matters, and what the next step is. So we really have to lay things out in a logical order for our patients to understand what it is that they need because we have our own language, right? Dentistry, we are very quirky with our own language, and sometimes we forget that we're speaking a foreign language. It's like listening to two pilots talk and thinking that we understand what they're saying, right? We don't. And it's the same thing happening with patients in dentistry. Team members are going to perform better when expectations are clear. Leaders reduce drama when they communicate with directness and compassion. So clarity is going to build trust because people don't have to guess what's happening or what's going on or what's next. And so confusion is going to create friction. Clarity is going to create the movement that we're looking for when we're leading. Throughout this webinar, we explored how presence influences every room you enter, whether you're leading a team or supporting a patient or navigating a challenging conversation. We began with emotional energy, recognizing that emotions are contagious and leaders often set the tone before any word is spoken. A regulated leader creates a more regulated team, while stress, frustration, and urgency can quickly ripple through the room. And I bet you everybody on this call has experienced that, right? All of a sudden, the mood of the day goes from a high level all the way down into the dungeon. And it happens. It happens. We're all human, right? Then we moved into professional presence, focusing on the ABCs, the appearance, behavior, and communication. The small details. I think Kelly really did beat that into us. It's the small details that we have to pay attention to because they build and they build and they build how we listen, how we respond, and how we show up consistently. Finally, we connected presence to communication influence. And I love that phrase, communication influence, because it's the whole ball of wax. It's not just one thing, it's doing several things that come together to create a better patient or team experience. Presence becomes powerful when it shows up through intentional words, your tone, your questions, your listening, your clarity, and the ability to pause before reacting. Influence isn't about saying more. It's about communicating with greater awareness, purpose, and trust. So as you leave here today, the question is not, do I have presence? The better question is, what message is my presence sending? And is the message I want people to receive? Is it the message I want people to receive? We challenge you, the three of us, to choose one presence habit to commit to change starting tomorrow. So we have time for a couple questions and then we'll come back around and finish up. So were there any questions that came in while I was going through the presentation?
Yes, Lisa, we came to how should we communicate when a patient doesn't move forward with treatment? I think you answered that in some of what you shared.
That was
Would
the
you want to
iceberg,
elaborate?
right? That's the iceberg. So listening to what they're saying, but trying to get to the root of the problem. What are they really? And a lot of times it's either fear of pain, fear of costs, right? But we've got to ask questions to get to that. So refer back to the iceberg that I showed you.
And then the other one here we have, how do you establish accountability with team members, but also be supportive?
So accountability is the number one reason that practices are successful. Roger Levin, a consultant on the East Coast, did a 30-year ongoing study about what is it that the top percent of practices have that make them that top percent. What is it? And accountability is number one. And so what that means is everyone has to commit and follow through with what they said they were going to do, and everybody holds them accountable as well. And it's more of a team culture that you build into. Particularly, usually it's one or two people that are not held accountable, and so it has to come from the leader, that direction that here's the direction we're going, and everybody, Jessica, you said you were going to do this by this date. Everybody holds Jessica accountable, and I hold myself accountable, right? I said I was going to do it, so I'm going to do it. And I've had the privilege of working in practices that are like that, and it is amazing how much more productive we are. And so it doesn't happen overnight. It does take a little bit of cultural teamwork, but it really is an important quality for our practices to succeed.
I like what you shared, Lisa, about saying, I see that this didn't get done. What got in the way and how can I support you?
Thank you.
That's, I think, it is a nicer way to tell someone you notice that they didn't meet that expectation. And I also think sometimes people need to understand why more
Right.
than we realize.
Hmm.
So a doctor might have a certain way of doing things that maybe the team doesn't fully understand or thinks is the long way around something, but there's probably a reason why. And so sometimes taking it back to the basics and saying, well, this is why we do it this way so that the patient doesn't assume this or so that we're prepared for this. And then the team member might have more buy-in because they realize the impact that not doing it will have.
Right. And everybody should be a leader on the team. It's not a dictatorship. And so at your team meetings, everybody contributes to the team topics and the subjects and how you resolve problems and what's your mission statement. And the team should be involved in many of the practice decisions so that you get buy-in from the team, right? It's my career. It's not just my job that I leave at 5 o'clock every day. Right. And I want to see the practice thrive because that's going to help my career thrive. So it's all about me, but not really.
I
Do we have
also
any?
think something to
Oh,
add
go ahead.
here would be just also making sure that, what we're trying to hold people accountable for is within their wheelhouse and is
Hmm.
is something that they can do successfully. I think sometimes we put people in with certain tasks that they just
Hmm.
don't maybe have a good chance at succeeding at because
Yeah.
of their own skills or strengths and weaknesses, and then we're asking them to complete it to a certain level, and it's just maybe not attainable. So making sure that you're building a strength-based workplace is also very important when you're holding people accountable, giving them that support to maybe
Yep.
help them enhance their strength as well.
Yeah. Focusing on people's strengths, right? If I'm not good at something, I'm probably not going to do the project very well. And if somebody else is really good at it, I can learn from them, but they would be the better paid person to lead the project. And have me as their assistant maybe because that'll help me learn, right, in something that I'm not very strong in. Any other
I
questions?
love what you guys are saying, and yeah, I would say I love what you guys are saying. Just chime in too, like early in your program presentation, and some of my thoughts too, like your behavior and communications. Like you're talking about what to say, but how it's said is very huge. Like the
Mhm.
sound of your voice and the body communication that supports it. So how you're communicating to your team, and are you leading with a kindness factor? That was a recent article that I did and about how kindness. I know the periodontist I work for. I work for him one day a week. Every day I came into the office is, I am so glad it's Wednesday. I'm so glad you're here. I mean, he was just kind in his,
Aw.
again, to the behavior and how he communicated. Now, that wasn't in, some of these scenarios, but it sets the stage. So even if you're in a serious conversation, how your body communicates, how your voice sounds, how that all supports what you're verbally saying as well is huge and can have a great impact.
Yep, absolutely. All
Back to the
right. I don't see
details.
any others, so let's circle
No.
around and we'll finish up. Your presence is felt before you ever say a word, and it shapes the level of trust, confidence, and connection to the people that are experiencing it and experiencing you. As you leave today, choose to communicate with intention because what people remember most is not what you said, it's how your presence made them feel. Once again, we want to thank Jonathan and Reach for our premier sponsor for this webinar. We really appreciate their support and great information. We will give you more information in a follow-up email if you have any more questions for Jonathan. Thank you so much for attending today. We appreciate you spending your time with us, and we'll send a follow-up email that includes everything. Oh, I just said that. I got ahead of myself. We will also put the AGD survey information in there so you can get credit if you need that. And now for the moment that most people are waiting for. The QR code is for completing the course survey to receive your AGD CE. If you're on your phone and you can't scan, the URL is below that, so just take a picture and you can get to your computer or type that in later. The deadline for the survey for you to get CE is September 4th. That's Friday, September 4th, right before the holiday weekend. So your verification for attendance will be emailed to you Tuesday, September 8th, after the holiday weekend, because we have Monday off. And if you have any questions, we'll send out that email tomorrow with resources pertaining to the information that we all talked about today. There's 3 really great resources, one from each of us in there. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have